Hey everyone. I wanted to do a review for a movie that was quite old, not really a modern film, but just putting it out there because why not? It's a movie that is a big disaster movie from 1970. I just started searching through Netflix. I was in Italy, oddly. I couldn't find this film, but I got back. The film was on in the States. Airport. Big film, was nominated for 10 Oscars. This launched the disaster film genre of the 70s. Tons of films came after this, from The Poseidon Adventure starring Gene Hackman and Roddy McDowall, a favorite of mine growing up, The Towering Inferno with Steve McQueen and Paul Newman, and there were other ones like Earthquake. They all are notable for having really cool, like, I want to say what is cool is the lore of it, the concept is disaster is really awesome to see. And also on top of that, they have posters that are very memorable, the designs of them. Roger Ebert once famously said, and this actually is very true now, if you see a poster with a bunch of faces on it, he said, like, in little boxes, because in the 70s they would put all the faces just in boxes for these big movies. He's like, that's how you knew it was going to be a bad movie. Kind of the same now when you see a floating head poster and you're like, well, this probably won't be that good because they're trying to put so many different heads in it, and you could always just tell. But in the 70s, they had so many of these movies, and it all started with Airport. This movie came out in 1970. It was directed by George Seaton. It stars George Kennedy, Burt Lancaster, Helen Hayes is in this. It has a variety of different actors. Dean Martin is in this. It just overall is such an odd film. Like, I'm just going to speak from the heart. I mean, as opposed to being like, well, the film was nominated for Oscars, which it was. But I want to acknowledge that in the 70s, it was such a different time. Obviously, I was not from the 70s, but clearly it was a different time. If you look at the movies that were so popular then, they kind of launched franchises. Like this film, it's so weird to me. Like, Death Wish came out 2 years after this movie. If you guys know Death Wish, the Charles Bronson movie about a guy who, his wife gets, like, killed, murdered, and then his daughter is abused and ends up in a psychiatric hospital. They made, like, 6 sequels to that movie. But if you watch it, it's such an odd film. Just about a guy who comes back from New York, his whole life is destroyed, and then he just starts learning to, like, shoot a gun. He learns to, like, kill people, and it just becomes this one-man psycho revenge story. And on top of that, Death Wish is just really corny and not so great. I'm only saying that now because when I watched Airport, it's a big ensemble action, not action film, but it's really a slow, kind of cozy movie. That's the thing. I don't want to say the movie's bad, but I was so surprised. As a kid, I thought this movie looked so cool. I watched Airplane when I was like 8. My parents showed me that. My uncle showed me that, actually. Like, I mean, honestly, like, he's the one who showed me that movie. But Airport is the big movie that, you know, it's this big disaster ensemble film, and everyone kind of was inspired by this movie, like, when it came out, and they made all sorts of big movies with real set pieces. You know, Titanic was the last big disaster film. It really was in the 90s. Then they stopped making them, or Roland Emmerich kept making them, but they just got worse. Like, if you saw Moonfall recently, it doesn't even really count. They're all just CG now. It doesn't feel like there's a weight to it. They aren't epics anymore. They don't have, like, tons of stars, you know? There was a time when tons of people were in them. But Airport, I just want to overall say, has this very old feeling to it. It's very, very dated in just that it's slow. It focuses on such small events. And nowadays they try to keep things fast-paced. Like, you'll see when they'll cut to a boardroom where a bunch of people are talking. They try to keep that fast-paced. This whole movie, though, is mostly the boardroom stuff. And honestly, some of it is interesting. I liked seeing the personal interactions. It's very cheesy, like the family drama, Burt Lancaster and his wife, or Dean Martin and his girlfriend. You know, all that stuff is like, whatever. It's you get stuff like that today. But it's just the fact that I was like, is this what people want to see? Like, in the 70s, like, there's a part where they're all sitting around looking at an airplane model, and they're like, well, like, this is the exit. This is how we'll get the passengers off. And I'm like, I can't imagine an audience sitting there in a theater. This was a box office hit, by the way. It's just so odd to me that this came out in the summer. It's a movie that's, like, set in the dead of winter. It's cold. It's such a cozy, like, you know, movie to watch. I feel like, you know, in your bed with, like, a cup of, like, coffee and just, like, at night in winter. But it's such an odd summer blockbuster to me. I don't know. That's just the 70s for you, though. When they were releasing all these, movies that I guess people were interested in that. They're like, an airport, this is going to be huge. There's a bunch of shit happening at an airport. Now people go to see Ant-Man Quantumania, and it's like, wow, Paul Rudd's stuck in an underground dimension. Like, honestly, what's the difference? I would pick airport any day. It just seems like much better, even if it is like kind of some rote situations combined with some like corny, charming stuff. Like the bit with the con lady who's trying to get on the airplane. It's so corny. She won an Oscar for the film, and then the film was also nominated for Best Picture. Like, it was just like an okay, schlocky movie at best. Not schlocky, but I mean, I just expected this to be very like cool. It was okay. It was what I kind of expected a 70s disaster movie. So I'm hoping the sequels are better. They're all on Netflix. I'm going to watch them. So thanks for watching, guys.